but I'm a hodge.
Caribbean.
I'm a pillar or a hodgepodge of different races, Scottish, Amerindian,
Okay.
African, number of different things here.
So we represent the United Nations here today. So anyway, you guys, is he ready
We're
with to
ready to
roll with this?
roll, doctor. We're ready to roll.
Okay, are we going to be going Facebook Live on
We're
Dr.
gonna be going Facebook Live on Dr. McDowell's. Yes, we're ready to roll.
Okay, and then I'm just going to record the rest, and then we can send you guys this link, and you can upload it to other
Live
things
at the
right now. Okay?
Dog Ministries.
Excuse
Broadcast.
me. Who did you say something, Dr. McDowell?
No, no. I was just mentioning something
Okay.
that they could broadcast that it's on Michael McDowell Ministries.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay, guys. Well, I'm gonna roll with this. Are we ready to roll Facebook Live? I'm gonna hit record, and then I'm gonna click on my intro. So are they ready on your end, Marshall?
We're ready to roll,
Okay.
Sherwin.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Okay. One, two, three. Hello, everybody. Dr. Mary Crowley here in Appleton, Wisconsin, in a hotel room for Now is the Time. And we've had quite a challenging situation here, but the thing is, the show must go on. So we have an established, group of doctors here with us today, including Dr. Vladimir Zelenko of the Zelenko Protocol. In fact, I'm an affiliate with Dr. Zelenko and the Z Stack. It's an incredible product. We've got Dr. Richard Flemming, and we also have Dr. Michael McDowell. And we're going to be going over about COVID, some of the things that have been happening around the world the last 2 years. That's literally an agenda that they have planned for the world. It's a depopulation agenda. The COVID-19 was a bioweapon. And then Dr. Michael McDowell, and each of them can give you a little of their credentials because, to be honest with you, I'm here in Appleton just to tell all you guys the truth. Um, one of the guys that I interviewed, I met him in Ohio at a Reawaken America tour, and his daughter Grace, who was 19, high functioning Down syndrome daughter, and she played the violin. She knew how to drive a car. She was just the love of their family's life, and she was literally murdered in the hospital here. And we're going to be doing an event tomorrow in front of the hospital for 3 hours from 9 till 12. It'll be streamed live here in Appleton, Wisconsin. But I just want to let you know, I literally got in the room and had 10 minutes to set up. So we are going to roll with this anyway because this is a very important show. So let's start with you, Dr. Zelenko. Let's go over a little bit about how you got into this. I know your story, but some of these viewers might. So why don't you share briefly, Dr. Zelenko, about how you got involved with your protocols?
Sure. So I'm a family physician, upstate New York, last 20 years. I serve a community of 35,000 people that live within a square mile of each other, very high population density. And the first week of March 2020, COVID arrived in my community and spread to everyone. So the truth is, I didn't choose COVID, it chose me, because I ended up in the epicenter of the largest outbreak at a time when there were no treatments even suggested, except go home on Tylenol, drink fluids. When you get short of breath, go to the hospital, get on a ventilator, and 85% of the people on ventilators at that time were dying. And so that was the treatment paradigm that we were given, which I didn't like, because these patients are family to me. Someone told me once I'm a family member to 4,000 families. And so I had skin in this game, and I was praying to God. I had no idea what to do, honestly. But I knew that my little office that used to see 50 patients a day, now it's inundated by 250 patients a day. Half my staff is sick. Radiology and phlebotomy services are shut down. The hospitals are full capacity almost. And I'm dealing with a mass casualty event. So it was necessity. They say necessity is the mother of all innovation. So that's how I got involved.
Well, then you also started, you found out when Governor Cuomo, the hydroxychloroquine that you had discovered was something that was being very effective. Then Governor Cuomo pretty much, banned it, and you had to find other protocols, which you did. And you even put a message into the White House, which I think you said Mark Meadows called you and wanted to know some of these protocols.
Yeah, so I made a video after I had 50 patients that I had treated already, and I noticed the same pattern. If patients were treated early enough, even the high risk patients, their breathing would improve 6 to 12 hours later. Now, obviously, the first dozen or so, I didn't believe it either, actually. But after 50 patients, I saw the same pattern. I realized, by the grace of God, that I had stumbled across something that's making a clinical difference. And I also realized what it could mean potentially. So, with the help of my son, I made a YouTube video because I'd never made a video before, and it was addressed to President Trump, and I sent it out to internet space. And 16 hours later, Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, called me on my cell phone, and I wouldn't believe it, except that it happened to me. And that started my relationship with the Trump administration. And when President Trump announced that he's taking hydroxychloroquine, he credited my letter, which I had then sent to him, as the basis for his rationale. And so that it brought me from a obscure small town upstate New York to the global stage. And my life has never been the same, for good and for bad, actually, since then.
Well, anyway, thank you, Dr. Zelenko. Now, Dr. Richard Flemming, share a little bit with your background and your history in medicine, and then how you got involved with COVID.
Well, I'm a PhD, MD, JD, so I started off as a physicist at a rather young age, and this is my 54th year of doing research. In the mid 70s, I was placed on American Heart Association faculty, and as a result, was on 3 different committees, including the Cholesterol Education Committee. And over the course of a couple of decades, I modified what I thought were the primary components of what caused an inflammatory thrombotic disease known as coronary artery disease, so inflammation and blood clotting. And in 1984 or 1994, rather, presented American Heart that theory, which explained that not only were cholesterol and homocysteine and fibrinogen and triglycerides related, but that viruses and bacteria also could be involved in that. And that is the same inflammatory thrombotic response that produces COVID 19. That is the reason why people go from having a viral infection with SARS CoV 2 to having a full blown disease known as COVID 19. So I had already presented that, and I'd done some previous work as a nuclear cardiologist with a patented test that has been abbreviated as Flemming method. It's much shorter than the name I gave to it. That quantitatively measures changes in tissue for regional metabolism and blood flow, and it allows you to find out whether somebody has an infection or cancer or what grade of cancer or if tissue's dead or heart disease, a variety of things. And so in January of 2020, when this was beginning to come to light, actually late December 2019, but I began researching as much as I could different drugs that were available for treating viruses. Since we knew this was a virus that everybody was talking about, and set up a national clinical trial protocol that we did in 1,800 people. That began in roughly March of 2020. Um, we looked at people outpatient and then inpatient. We looked to see whether they got better with different drug treatments or if they elected to have no treatment in the beginning. About 60% of people got better anyway in 72 hours. But if they got admitted to the hospital with worsening symptoms, then we did Flemming method, and we did several blood tests, and we did other routine tests. And then they were randomly selected to a treatment. And then every 72 hours, that treatment was looked at, including Flemming method, to determine if it measured a benefit. So if we get an opportunity, we can talk about what we saw with remdesivir and some other drugs. So one of the drug protocols worked 100% of the time, but as I tell people, if we do enough people, somebody's not going to benefit from it. So we did that. At the same time, being the type of person and research physician that I am, I was also looking into the virus and the origins of the virus. And that led to a lot of information with gain of function. It's produced a lot of different information, not only on how the virus was put together, but who was involved and where the funding came from and what the specific changes are and why the vaccines themselves are actually doing what's called pressure selection, producing the variants that we've seen. They're the direct result of the vaccine sequences. Looking at human blood and adding the vaccine to it has been one of the things we've done as of the latter part of last year, where we took the Pfizer, Moderna, and Janssen, which is what most people think of as Johnson & Johnson, directly added that to human blood. And we've looked at the vaccines to see what's really in them under the microscope. And then that has allowed me to put together not only the book Is COVID-19 a Bioweapon, which lays out for people what they need to know about the origin and the gain of function research, but then to produce an affidavit. I can't be the attorney and an expert witness, so I'm going to be the expert witness. And since this is going to be a criminal prosecution case, it's the government that has to try it anyway. Because the government represents the people in criminal actions. And then I produced a deposition. So the affidavit is sworn under oath, and the deposition, that's about a 45-minute video, was sworn under oath, actually by a Texas court reporter. And the deposition was taken by an attorney that has argued before and won before the Supreme Court of the United States. And then, as I mentioned briefly before we came on the air, Judy Mikovits, Patrick Wood, Reiner Furmick, and myself will begin the Crimes Against Humanity tour on the 23rd of this month of April. We begin in Fort Myers, and then we have 9 cities that we go to. And the goal of that, as far as I'm concerned, is to not only make people aware of all this information, but to also indict these people, because the only way that this stops is to hold them criminally, not civilly, criminally accountable. So we have set up a team of what I have dubbed Valkyries, given my ancestry. And these Valkyries of about 15 to 20 women will follow up on the materials that I have sent so far to 28 governors and attorney generals, demanding that the material be looked at and that grand juries, real grand juries that will really do something about this, be convened to hold these criminals accountable.
Yeah. Well, they should be held accountable. Well, thank you for what you do, Dr. Flemming. Dr. Michael McDowell, I heard as I was driving over to, the hotel here, I was listening to some of and you were talking about some of the same things. Give a little bit about your background and then bring forth some similar things of what you're doing, in regards to COVID-19.
Okay, thank you so much. It's great to be on, Dr. Crouley, and thank God for the work that you are doing and the guests that you have on as well. I have been able, over the last 8 months, to do quite a few interviews with some of the top doctors globally in the field. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten to Dr. Flemming and Dr. Zelenko, but we've had Dr. Peter McCullough, Professor Dolores Cahill, a whole plethora of the doctors who are really making a difference around the world. But what amazes me most of all is the different backgrounds of the people that God is bringing together to fight this scourge on the earth. I believe humanity is facing the greatest existential crisis in the history of human civilization, and it needs to be addressed. I thank God that we have somebody like Dr. Vladimir Zelenko on board, who is an expert on treatment, and we have heard of the famous Zelenko protocols. And I have heard a number of videos over the last few months by Dr. Richard Flemming. But I think what bowled me over was the legal deposition I saw The video I saw was 54 minutes long, and it was absolutely cutting edge. And I've subsequently purchased the book, and I'm going through it now. And everything that I've been researching over the last 2 years have come together in that text and in his deposition. COVID-19 is definitely a bioweapon. But let me give you how I got to this place. I'm a senior pastor of a church in Trinidad and Tobago called Rafa Revival Ministries. I've been in ministry I've been a pastor for 30 years, and all my qualifications, my highest qualifications is a doctorate of theology, which is a THD. And but in addition to my theological qualifications, my real expertise is in the area of eschatology. I have lectured globally in eschatological conferences all over the Caribbean, all over the US, all over Canada, Israel, Africa, a number of other places. So this is my area of expertise. And one of the additional subjects or ways I have educated myself to be a proper eschatologist, because in eschatology, we seek to interpret divine prophecy in the light of an earthly context. So we need not only know the divine prophecy, we need to understand how it's going to be fulfilled in the real world. And to do that, I've had to study things like history of civilization, international affairs, geopolitics, covert geopolitics. I have been very, very strong in the study of genetics, very, very strong there. I have a strong science background, a biological sciences background. I did biology at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And so what sparked the research for me was when I saw the things that were happening concerning vaccines that were actually gene therapy. I recognized them as gene therapy from my eschatological research. And I've also done a lot of work on what we call the antediluvian earth and the society that existed in the antediluvian earth. And it is my belief that there was an extremely advanced civilization in the antediluvian earth. That's the pre-flood earth. And one of the apostasy of the antediluvian earth was an attempt by mankind in those days to seek to change the genome of every human being on the planet. The Bible actually says that God found Noah to be faithful and he was perfect in his generations. In the Hebrew, it says perfect in his genealogies. So Noah and his family of 8 were found to be purely human and were taken by God and saved in an ark to replenish the earth with pure humanity. When I saw Bill Gates announcing and attempting to vaccinate 8 billion people or 7.5 billion people on this planet with a gene therapy vaccine, immediately it sparked that something was wrong, and this was probably a repeat of what happened in the antediluvian earth. And in fact, the scripture says in Matthew chapter 24:37 that as it was in the days of Noah, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. I believe what is happening now is a signal that we are close to the end of time. I believe humanity has gotten to the place where they're interfering with the sacred code, the imago Dei, the image of God in man. And they're seeking to change the human genome and do many other things as well. And that to me says that God is about to intervene. Of course, on a practical basis, in my own country, we saw laws being passed and things being orchestrated that were oppressing the citizenry. So I myself and other concerned pastors got together. We call ourselves TT Response. Not everybody in the church was doing this. Some of the church just bowed and went along with the international health regulators and the government mandates. But we stood up and we spoke against it. And in fact, it was one of my presentations in a TT Response meeting, that a 24-minute presentation that actually just went global. It went viral. And I talked about a number of issues. I talked about the bioweapons issue. I talked about viral immune escape. And then I talked about the signals that we are seeing from the COVID-19 data. That went viral, and since then I've been contacted by people from all over the world. Some of my material has been translated into Arabic. I have Muslims calling me and saying that they're asking Allah to protect me. I'm just showing you how wide the response has been, and I think it is really tremendous. I do not think the COVID-19 vaccine deception, I believe, has been stymied by the kind of work that we all have been doing. But I believe there's a lot more that needs to be done. There's an aftermath that we need to deal with. And I believe Dr. Flemming, particularly right now, is dealing with it effectively in terms of seeking to prosecute and to indict these men for crimes against humanity. I have followed the work of Rainer Fulmick, and I know that something wonderful is happening. And so it's a joy for me to be on, and I really have a lot to say given the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Dr. McDowell. You know, I always talk about, you know, the unholy trinity. You had big tech, big pharma, and then the media is the false prophet. You know, I'm on the West Coast in Hollywood in the LA area, and, you know, my area of expertise has been the media, working on content that will change the culture through the films we create. Well, right now I'm working on a documentary about, you know, human trafficking, sex trafficking in America. And as I've researched the bloodline families and why they're doing this, you know, the trafficking has been one of the number one ways they're making, you know, money. You know, it's just a horrific situation. But so many people, you know, doctors don't want to even know about it. It's almost like they want to put their head in the sand and just their ears, you know, hands over their ears. Like if they don't hear it, it's not going to make a difference. So I think some of that is happening with the COVID-19 and with the jabs, because I won't call it a vaccine. It's not a vaccine. So, Dr. Zelenko, you know, where do we go from here? You've been traveling all over the country. You've got your Zelenko protocol. You've been targeted. You know, you've been one of the doctors that has been targeted by some of these people. They've threatened you. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I found out recently from a high-level source that I'm on a Pfizer assassination list, that they're looking to take out doctors that have been advocating for pre-hospital care. I'm actually the one that let Brian Artis know, and he's taking it seriously. So yeah, I mean, this has been going on for 2 years. But I'd like to share with you my forest for the trees kind of understanding. I think this is a test by God to every single individual to see who we choose to worship. In other words, are we going to bow down to the Creator who makes us every instant of time out of love and ask Him for the fortitude to weather the uncertainty and fears of life? Or are we going to bow down to sociopathic oligarchs and corrupt governments in a codependent, cultish way? Because really, that's the question. And why is it coming to a head now is because as a society, I would say even America has become analogous to Sodom and Gomorrah. What do I mean? Well, we've desecrated the sanctity of life by slaughtering the unborn, and now people advocating for infanticide. We've desecrated the sanctity of marriage. We've desecrated the sanctity of gender. And we've codified and normalized debauchery and immorality as the law of the land. And so if these degenerates had their way, my 4-year-old will be sharing a bathroom with a 30-year-old man who thinks he's a woman, or sitting in a public school having a transvestite in full drag read to 6-year-olds. These things have happened. That's why I'm mentioning it. And so I think that we've slipped to we've created a vacuum for where darkness and the primordial serpent could thrive. And what they call the New World Order, in my opinion, is just rebranding of the oldest world order of idolatry, paganism, and child sacrifice. And if you sum total all these degenerates together, what you really do have is the primordial serpent. And I mean it, because if you just listen to the narrative in the Bible and listen to the narrative of what these people are saying right now. In the Bible, it says the snake came to Eve and said, eat from the tree of knowledge of good and bad. She said, I can't. God said no. And so what did he convince her? He said no, because from that day, when you eat from it, you will become like God, knowing the difference between good and bad. And so the prophet nowadays, his name is Yuval Noah Harari, very dangerous person. And the reason why he's known as the prophet, he's literally worshipped by Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and Obama called him on CNN his favorite author. And so what does this person say? Just have to listen to his words. He says humans are hackable animals. And if we can hack we can re-engineer, but not with intelligent design, but not some God intelligent design, but human intelligent design. We are now gods. And you see these degenerates, Biden also sitting there in the crowd, clapping like a seal. And you realize that we are being governed, or we've given power to really people that are advocating for another Tower of Babel, to come together and we're going to fight God in unison. But this is a historical replay, biblical replay of the same old story over and over again. Just the battlefield has shifted to enslavement through fear, COVID-19 bioweapon, and its absolutely horrific vaccine response.
Well, and that's true. You know, what they were doing, as you remember, with the Mount Carmel with Elijah and the prophets of Baal, they were, you know, the Baal and the Asherah poles, they were killing the babies. And that's what they want to do in California. They have a bill now that just, I think, went through the first stage that they can kill a baby, I think, up into the first 30 days in California. There's many bills they're trying to push through really, really fast. And so people are waking up, but some of them aren't waking up fast enough. And that's why I'm putting these doctors on for you guys to wake up, because really they're after our children. They're really coming after our children. And so, Dr. Flemming, what are your observations on this? I know that they need to be indicted. These people have to be held as criminals, just like during the Nuremberg trials. But why don't you share with the people exactly what they can be doing too, because really we all need to be involved, just like we've been seeing a lot of the parents now going to school board meetings and doing all these other things. They're running for office. We're seeing a lot of people that weren't involved before now that are jumping in because they see how fast this has gone out of control.
Right. Well, it's very important that everybody realize that even though they're seeing whomever on mainstream media or on alternative media, that it's not going to just be the people that are showing up to do interviews that are going to make a difference. It's going to require that the everyday individual make a decision about what type of life they want to live and what type of road they want to lead. One of the I did a couple interviews yesterday where we were talking with Lauren Davis, who is somebody that is running for office in the Dallas, Texas, and she's going to be the county judge, which is not really a judge, but it's the head person. And I've been working with her and several other people on positions for the different parties to take and for people to think about to get passed into law, if that's what we have to do, to control the unbridled abuse of the political system going on. Most people are not very civics is something that they don't seem to teach in school anymore. And so most people are not aware that in the United States, when this country was founded, it was the states, the founding fathers, who established the states, and the states agreed in a compact to form a constitution. So the reason for stating that is that the power structure that determines what does happen, independent of who else thinks they're running the planet, is that the citizens of the United States run their states, and the states run the federal government. The federal government does not run the states, and the states run the people. And during the last couple of years, we've seen an awful lot of people just kind of acquiesce to the federal government says we must do this. Federal government says we need to shut down businesses. The federal government says we all need to be masked. The federal government says we all need to be vaccinated. The federal government says we need to be vaccinated again. And if you look at the science doesn't support the vaccinations actually having the consequence. The people really need to stand up. One of the reasons for doing the tour, one of the reasons for the book and everything else is for people to understand the truth of what's going on and then to make decisions themselves, to make intelligent decisions. Now, I understand that a lot of people masked up, vaccinated because what they thought they were doing was the right thing, because they were told this was the right thing to do. And again, some of that is control and manipulation of the people psychologically. I have a master's in psychology, so this is basic bread and butter psychology and how you manipulate people. Um, but a lot of people really did it from the point of view of trying to do the right thing for their neighbors and their friends and their families. They just didn't realize it wasn't helping. And part of what I did when we first got to Dallas was to let people know, instead of becoming at odds with people who've been masked and vaccinated, to simply recognize that they thought they were doing the right thing. And once you do that, then people who are masked and vaccinated suddenly realized, well, you're not their enemy. You understand what they're doing. And so part of what the general public needs to do is to recognize why other people behave the way they did, not to allow themselves to be pitted against each other in one side or the other. The second thing they need to do is they need to stand up for what they're responsible for. This scenario, whatever you want to call it, battle, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, is not about you and me. It's really not about the four of us here or anybody else showing up on social media. This is about deciding what type of world you want to live in, what type of world you want to leave your children and your grandchildren. I point out to people frequently that my grandparents looked at my parents and said, "We want a better life for you." My parents looked at me and my siblings and said, "We want a better life for you." What has happened here in the last 2 years is an awful lot of people taking the perspective of, we're willing to let our children and our grandchildren have whatever type of life the people in power say that they should have, as opposed to the parents standing up and saying, these are our children. This young lady, Lauren Davis, her opponent attacked her because what they did with Lauren is they put her children behind cones at school in gym, so they couldn't touch the other kids. And then they put them actually in plastic boxes as they tried to figure out how to quarantine these children in school. And her opponent said, she was using her children to get elected. And I pointed out yesterday, as we were talking about this, that no, what was happening is they were trying to flip the discussion. It wasn't about Lauren using her children to get elected. It was the fact that these people did this to her children. And the federal government, since I've gone down this rabbit hole with people, are not the parents of these children. I have 3 children. I have 3 children. The federal government did not help conceive these children. Lauren has 3 children. Dr. Zelenko has 8 children. Dr. McDowell, I don't know how many you have, and Dr. Crouley, I don't, 2 children. The federal government, Dr. Fauci, NIAID, CDC were not involved in the conception of these children. So these are my children to decide what I'm going to do with, because nobody is going to take care of them like I'm going to take care of them. If you think that somebody else is going to take care of your children better than you're going to take care of your children, then you are a lousy parent, because you obviously, in my opinion, don't care enough about those children. So these issues relate to basically understanding what's going on, making decisions about what is and is not reasonable. The smartest people I ever met in my life didn't have a PhD, an MD, or a JD. He was a carpenter with an 8th grade education because he was raised during the Depression, and a homemaker who had a 12th grade education, who stayed home to help do it. And those are my parents. Those are the smartest people I've ever met in my life. Okay, and they didn't have any advanced degrees. But they were the smartest people I ever met in my life, and they cared about their children, and they didn't. They actually thought about things that people would talk to them about, and were smart enough to sort out, without advanced degrees, whether they thought somebody was telling them the truth or not telling them the truth. Um, the data is pretty clear. I mean, Dr. Fauci knew when this pandemic started, that there was a 2007 National Science Foundation study paper that was funded by the United States, investigated by the United States, Italy, and France, that showed that if you think there's going to be a pandemic, the first thing you have to do is you have to shut down international travel. Now, Dr. Fauci, being the head of the NIAID, and I'm sure he has children, should have known that. He's got one of three scenarios. He either knew about it and didn't read it, knew about it and didn't understand it, or didn't know about it. But he's head of that department, and so for him to be in that position and not to have done anything about it is not doing his job. We now know from the Hopkins study that was released, where they looked at more than 28,000 papers, and only less than 1% of those papers were even scientifically valid enough to be looked at. And those papers were on masking and mandates and everything else. And what they discovered out of that entire review was that 90% of the benefit that occurred was on social distancing when people thought they were sick, and good hand washing. Now, what we used to teach people when they got sick was stay home and not infect other people. Didn't require a national moratorium on movement, and you know, fluids, rest, aspirin, that type of thing, and to wash your hands. And that turned out to be 90% of what made a difference in the spread of this virus from beginning to end, including right now. And we're going to continue to have variants, whether this, the gain of function that made this virus, it's still a virus, it still behaves as a virus. um, Dr. Zelenko frequently does not get recognized today by a lot of people who jump up and say, oh, they started all the pre-treatment, advanced treatment, treat early protocols. um, you heard from him today, and you've heard several other times from him that he's talked about, if you're sick, get in to see a doctor. There are treatments available. We were doing treatments in March of 2020 as well. There are lots of people, lots of good people that have been promoting, if you're sick, don't make other people sick, and see your doctor and find a doctor that actually still believes in practicing medicine. However they're doing that, I don't want to get into the specifics of whether the medicines that they think work do or don't, because we could get into. I'm a scientist. I want measurement. Even on the stuff I do. Which is probably a long-winded answer for all that, but there's more than one thing, and it's the recognition that you know there may be a price to pay for this. Don't expect that everybody's going to come up and pat you on the back and say good job, and yeah, I mean, that's not what's going to happen when you stand up for your children. But that's not what you should expect when you're standing up for your children, right? That's not what you should expect when you're standing up for the people around you or the people that are important to you. Your job, your responsibility isn't to get patted on the back. It's simply to do what you think the right job is. That's what the people did who masked up and got vaccinated, but nobody was sharing information, and we're all in the process of trying to share that information and help people, and I think it's becoming blatantly obvious. But again, if you think these people are going to roll over and say, oh, okay, I give up, you guys win, we're going to go home, you're sadly mistaken. If you think that you want to take and uh, have a world that is worth passing on to your children and grandchildren, you're going to have to fight for it in one way or another. I'm not advocating, stupid stuff. Gandhi was extremely effective, wasn't he? I mean, he brought down the British Empire by just being persistent and saying no, no. And we're going to have to address these people criminally, because we're not going to take them down any other way. They're going to have to be held criminally accountable. And this is an example where people can call their elected officials and say, we want something done about that. There's data out there that anybody can find, whether it's the book or the affidavit or any of the other stuff, that proves without a shadow of a doubt that these people are criminals. We've taken this to 5 focus groups to see if I'm nuts, right? I mean, if this information doesn't make sense to regular individuals. And Not a single person, and there's been at least a dozen in each focus group, not a single person in any focus group has said anything other than these people need to be indicted.
Yes. No, and that's true. And they're coming after our children. And like I said, being
Yep.
out in LA and in Hollywood, there was a number of people that went in front of Disney in Burbank and are standing up to what they're trying to indoctrinate our children with. I mean, I think parents should boycott Disney. They shouldn't go to
Yeah.
Disney. They should
I
no,
saw that. I
boycott it.
saw that on the internet myself today. And it's obvious that people, if people are willing to stand up to Disney, right? Because I remember being a kid growing up. And I don't want to speak for everybody here, but I thought we basically had good stuff coming out of Disney. It was stuff that my parents loved having us watch. But Disney is an entertainment system. It doesn't have a right, I think, to start telling people how to think or behave morally or to practice medicine. It's kind of like I've said,
Right.
Bill Gates, the only viruses he should be working are the ones for his computer systems, and he doesn't seem to
Yeah.
be very good at that.
Well, they have an agenda. We know what they're doing. Well, thank you, Dr. Flemming. Let's go to Dr. McDowell. We're trying to keep the ball rolling here with, where people listening, we all have a different perspective. I also have a doctorate in divinity. Mine is I'm also a minister. That's what I do. So I know a lot about the Bible and a number of things with the youth. In fact, what I just did up in Oregon, I was speaking at the Reawaken America tour. And then I'm gonna have you share, Dr. McDowell. But what God told me, He said to me, you need to start reaching out to the youth. I had something I did back in 20 years ago called Youth Wave, and we reached out with large concerts to young people, and they would come and they would hear this great music, and then we'd have these youth pastors, and it was something a program that God had given me to do, but 2 months ago, he said to me, I need you to start reaching out to the youth again, but this time don't call it Youth Wave, call it regeneration. And when I looked up regeneration, it means come alive. And God is bringing in the generations, the 4 generations of grandfather, father, son, and grandson. He's bringing in the 4 generations. So along with that, Dr. McDowell, what would you say about what you see happening with the youth and with what this protocol and this agenda that they're trying to push on our culture right now?
Yeah, well, Dr. Mary, I want to really congratulate you for reaching your community. I believe one of the mandates that the Lord has given the church is we need to reach out to our community. We can't confine the gospel within the four walls of our church. We need to reach out. And we ourselves at Rafa Revival Ministries, we have been involved in a number of high-level concerts over the years where we try to bring some of the top Christian entertainers or Christian ministers who minister in the area of music to Trinidad and Tobago. And in addition to concerts, we've also had conferences. One notable conference we had in 2006 was we brought a gentleman called Dr. Hal Lindsey, who is considered to be the grandfather of Bible prophecy. We brought him to Trinidad for a 3-day, powerful 3-day extravaganza. And people are still talking about it. So I believe the church has a part to play in reaching out to the community. And because of this, we have been very involved in what is happening here, in what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago with the COVID. When they banned ivermectin in Trinidad, we raised our voices. And a number of other issues that we were very strong, we spoke up very strongly against. As you're speaking about church, I was praying recently, and the Lord brought to my mind an Prophet Elisha. Yes, an incident with the Prophet Elisha. And in this incident, they were gathering some vegetables and root tubers and so on to put into a large pot to make a big soup for all the sons of the prophets or the prophetic students to eat. But somebody mistakenly gathered some gourds and some different things that were not palatable, that were poisonous, and they threw it into the brew. And when the students started to eat, somebody exclaimed, "There's death in the pot." And that phrase, "there's death in the pot," God spoke to me, related that to me to the vaccines. And I really believe the vaccines are poisonous. And I've been shouting for over 2 years that the vaccines are really not vaccines at all. And the things that we have been trumpeting for 2 years have now come to pass. Documents have been released proving this. So while they were calling us conspiracy theorists and quacks, we now understand that they are really the conspiracy theorists and quacks, because the real science is proving that they were wrong all along. The 55,000 pages that we got from the Pfizer data dump, and the fact that 1,246 side effects have been associated with these vaccines. I mean, you name it, neural venal thrombosis, acute kidney failure, neonatal death, a whole host of adverse side effects that are actually killing people. The fact that mRNA is actually converted into DNA using the enzyme reverse transcriptase in the nucleus, and that said double-stranded DNA then coalesces with the chromosomal DNA to affect the human genome, has now become a reality through 2 academic papers that have been done using a line of liver cells. So the facts are coming out. And then additionally, I hear that vaccine-associated emerging diseases have become a prevalent thing. And Pfizer documents show clearly that they knew about this before the release. And so I heard recently that by the end of 2022, we're going to have practically an epidemic of AIDS, vaccine-associated AIDS, and cancers are proliferating. So now let me just add to that. I came into contact with a source, a pretty exclusive source, who considers himself a whistleblower concerning the vaccine patents. And what others have been seeing, I've followed the work of Dr. Carrie Madej and Dr. Lee Merritt, what they have been seeing in light microscopy and Raman spectroscopy and different fields of investigating the actual vaccine vials. What this gentleman pointed me to, he's an ex-military person, ex-special forces. He no longer lives in the US. I won't say where he's from, but he pointed me to the vaccine patents. And from the vaccine patents, I can't go into details now. I'm just going to read for you a clip that I put together concerning what the vaccines really are, what the so-called vaccines really are. What we are being injected with, Dr. Mary, Dr. Crouley, what we are being injected with is an alphabet soup of component parts and a self-assembling operating system and communication system. It is based on a hydrogel matrix and an allotrope of carbon called graphene. Graphene is actually the strongest substance in the world, and it is a superconductor. It also contains neurotoxins, microbeads for drug delivery across the blood-brain barrier, behavioral control agents, and self-assembling nanobots, which can be remotely controlled to use the CRISPR technology to remove and replace genomic sequences in our DNA and thus alter the human genome. That's what we are being investigated with and injected with. And the contents of the vaccine are related to the intent of the vaccine. The vaccines are just a tool, a stepping stone in the direction of transforming not only humanity, but human society. And again, that's a whole topic, but transhumanism is a topic, all by itself. And so we are, I actually came across a new word. I don't know, this may not be new to Dr. Flemming and Dr. Zelenko, but the word was neuroparasitology or neuroparasitology. And apparently there are parasites in nature. They operate particularly with the insects, and they can infect each other. And these parasites then take control of the neurons of the different animals that they infect. And they exert what is called behavioral control. And I understand that some of the people who have been examining the vaccines have been finding parasites and parasites' eggs in the vaccines. I wonder if that has anything to do with neuroparasitology. I found that neuroparasitology is a very, very new science, and it's now being really explored. So this is another possibility. So I believe that what is happening with the vaccines is really tremendous in terms of horrifying. And if I might let me just close my submission here by reading a clip from Dr. Gerd van den Bosch. I had the opportunity to interview Dr. van den Bosch on December 30th, I believe it was December 30th, 2020, just a few months ago. And I've just received a communication from him that says this: I seriously expect that a series of new, highly virulent and highly infectious SARS-CoV-2 variants will now rapidly and independently emerge in highly vaccinated countries all over the world, and that they will soon spread at high pace. I expect the current pattern of repetitive infections and relatively mild disease in vaccinees, that's the vaccinated, to soon aggravate and be replaced by severe disease and death. Now, Dr. Van den Bosch has been saying all along that if we don't immediately stop this mass vaccination program in the midst of a pandemic, what's gonna happen? We're gonna experience an international catastrophe of mass fatalities, and he is further exploring that thought. He says finally, unfortunately, there is no way vaccinees or the vaccinated can rely on assistance from their innate immune system to protect them against coronaviruses, as their relevant innate antibodies are increasingly being outcompeted by infection-enhancing vaccinal antibodies, which are continuously recalled due to the circulation of the highly infectious Omicron variants. In other words, Dr. Van den Bosch is pointing toward calamity ahead. In the next few months, we're going to see countries that have been highly vaccinated, where there are lots of vaccinees, of fully vaccinated people coming down with all sorts of diseases, and we could experience mass mortality. I know a number of doctors have been addressing what we can do to help the vaccinated, and that's a whole. I'm in touch with a number of naturopaths and other doctors who have putting in place protocols, to address that very thing. So I believe the aftermath of the COVID-19 vaccination scenario is going to be terrible. And again, I commend the work of both Dr. Zelenko and Dr. Flemming, especially in going after indictments for crimes against humanity. I believe it's going to happen. And if you study the history of the Nuremberg trials and all the industries like IG Farben that were involved in World War II, and the production of the gases used in Auschwitz and different places, and the companies, the pharmaceutical companies that worked with them, actually during Operation Paperclip, a lot of Nazi technology, not only rocket technology, but vaccine chemists were imported from Germany to the United States, where the research was renewed. And so we are facing lots of stuff that the society needs to grapple with. And just as IG Farben and a number of other of these companies, industrialists, were prosecuted and indicted during the Nuremberg trials, I believe we need to actually definitely go in that direction.
Yes. No, thank you, Dr. McDowell. Well, let's do this. Let's wrap it up in the next 10 minutes. I don't like to go over an hour just because, people don't typically like to watch something too long. We can come back and do more of this. But as you're talking here, what I'm hearing God speak to me is that as we close this out tonight, each of you, of course, being men, right now, in the Bible, in the last chapter in the Bible, the book of Malachi, it says that I will turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children and the hearts of the children back to the fathers, lest I strike the earth with a curse. He said he's going to send the spirit of Elijah. We are in a spiritual battle right now between good and evil. And, Satan, the demonic realm, the Luciferian agenda is no match with God. God sits in the heavens and he laughs. But the thing is what Satan, because, he can't be God. He wants to make us his creations. And that's why he's trying to change, our genome, as you talked about. And so, I believe that what's going to happen is a great awakening. And, years ago, guys, I was down in San Diego speaking and ministering at a recovery home. And I heard God speak to me, and he said to me, tell them I can change their DNA. And I thought about that. He said where they don't need alcohol. They don't need addictions. And he told me recently that what's happened with this jab is that if people will repent, meaning, because they did it out of fear, sometimes maybe they didn't want to lose their job, or maybe, as you said, Dr. Flemming, they wanted to help people, but in essence, they still didn't trust God, and they didn't do the research, a lot of people. And so what I heard him say is people just need repentance, just changing your heart. That's all it is. So I want each one of you guys, each one of you doctors, to share, almost like you talked about, Dr. Flemming, that your father and mother were the smartest people that you knew. They call the World War II generation the greatest generation because they went through the hard times. They didn't just give their kids everything. The kids grew up in a way where, they knew what it was like to be poor and to struggle. And, right now in our country, kids get everything. And so, what would you say if you were, if your son or one of your relatives were in front of you, Dr. Zelenko, and you had to talk to them like you were a father of what's going to happen and to give them comfort or peace or hope? I really feel what God is telling me to tell you each, that He wants you to speak to the culture as a father, what you would say, because right now, like Paul said, there's 10,000 instructors in Christ, but there's not many fathers among you. So the men are the ones that are going to have to rise up like all you three have and speak up. And I think we're going to see this nation turn around. But let's start with you, Dr. Zelenko. You are the father of 8 children. I think you're more. I think you have more than I have 3. Dr. Flemming has 3, and how many do you have, Dr. McDowell?
I have two children.
So you have the same amount with all of us combined. So,
So what I would tell my children is exactly what I tell them, which is I'm very optimistic about the future. I see a lot of hope. I see the true narrative. The knowledge of God will fill the world just as the waters cover the seas. The only variable here until we get there is the body count. And in order to mitigate that carnage, I don't see a natural solution to this. I think that the enemy is taken root and cannot be displaced in conventional ways. And let me be very specific exactly what I mean. I believe we're on the verge of a messianic revelation and that we need a supernatural intervention. However, supernatural interventions aren't free. We have to pay for them. And the payment in this particular context is, you mentioned it, you got it right, the reconciliation of human hearts en masse with their creator and the renunciation of the worship of false gods, of technology and science and money and power and lust and all these other things, and the worship of the one true God. You mentioned earlier, someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Dr. McDowell, about Noah. And we are all literally brothers and sisters because we all come from Noah. Adam, but then God cleaned the house. And the only survivors of the flood were Noah and his wife, his 3 sons and 3 daughters. And so we are all descendants of Noah. And his family was given 7 very specific laws, which are relevant to every single human being, everywhere, all the time, because we're all descendants of Noah. And what are those laws? They'll seem so natural and resonate in the souls of people so that you'll know it's true. Number 1 is don't believe in the one God. Believe in the one God. Number 2 is don't worship false gods. Number 3, 4, and 5 is don't steal, don't murder, and don't commit adultery. By the way, which completely makes sense. How can you have stable society if you don't respect the property rights, life itself, and marital or familial boundaries? Number 6 is to establish courts of justice that are actually interested in enforcing the rule of law. And number 7 is to not torture animals. In a sense, it says don't eat from a limb of an animal while it's alive, which the way I understand it means respect God's creation. Everything was created for your use, but don't abuse it. Don't cause unnecessary pain. So if just we adhere to certain common reasonable concepts of the belief in the one God, the renunciation of false gods, maintaining societal order, enforcing societal law, and respecting God's creation and its creatures. And I think that when there's a certain critical mass of human hearts that do choose to reconciliate with God, that will usher in, that's the price tag for ushering in a supernatural intervention. That because God could, in a nanosecond, just remove the spirit of iniquity from the world, just like that. And it's really upon us to take personal responsibility for the vacuum of divinity that we've allowed to exist so that these forces of satanic forces could thrive. But the good thing about taking responsibility is you could actually change things. It's not outside of your control. And it begins with the changing of the self. By the way, it's much easier to tell other people what to do than to do it yourself. But the reality is, if you live a life, lead by example, not just words, then there's certain, like, it's very counterintuitive, but the amount of tranquility and serenity that I live with internally now, I couldn't even imagine is possible, which is interesting because I've been the tip of the spear and I've witnessed carnage on a scale that I didn't realize is possible. But yet, when a person feels somewhat that they're in alignment with the will of God or what God wants for me to be doing, there's a certain peace that comes in. It's far from easy, by the way. It's really hard, but it doesn't matter. There's a certain mission alignment that breeds vitality and happiness and purpose and so on. So my blessing to anyone who's listening is realize that you're God's son or daughter. You know, my 4-year-old daughter, she's 15 now, but when she was 4, she came over to me and she said, "Daddy, you're my brother." I said, "What do you mean?" So she said, "Well, God is my father and he's your father, right?" And so her logic is impeccable. It's unbelievable. It's so obvious. So we are all brothers and sisters. We all are made in the image of God. We need to protect that image by not giving unauthorized access to our genetic code, not to allow ourselves to be enslaved, analogous to the mark of the beast system that you may know of. And then don't allow, there's a verse in the Torah that says, Lo letohu nibra ha'olam ela l'shavas yitzarta. God did not create the world so that it should be desolate. Rather, so he formed it so it should be populated, settled. It's not our department how many people belong on the planet, how long they live, and who should be free. And so what these vaccines do, they do a lot of things except prevent COVID-19. They lead to reduction of the world population by either immediate death or decrease in lifespan due to chronic illness, infertility, and miscarriages. And so don't allow other human beings to desecrate the sanctity of life. Do not submit to the fear. And number 2 is they definitely have tracking technology. There are patents I could show you that explain how these vaccines already possess the technology to measure biometric data, your heart rate, your respiratory rate, your temperature, and then transmit that data to a third party with your location. And then there is the genetic editing or transhumanism component, which these degenerates say in their own words. Listen to Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates. They tell you these vaccines change who you are by editing your genetic code. I mean, I wouldn't give these people the access to my email. Why would I give them access to my genetic code where the image of God is imprinted?
Yes. Well, thank you, Dr. Zelenko. You know, you're an amazing man. We are going to continue to pray for you and your family. And I believe you're going to live many years on this earth before God takes you home. That's what we're going to pray for. Dr. Flemming, what last statements do you want to have to say, in particular in light of the fact that you talked about your own parents and what you would say to those watching us today?
Right. I may not have the most children, but I think I have the oldest ones. um, um, and I like to think that the messages that I've shared with them as they were growing up are the same messages that I would share with them today. And the same message that I shared again with Lauren Davis yesterday when she was talking about what her daughter having emotional problems right now due to the isolation that she's gone through, the loss of friends, and the stigma that was placed on her by trying to stand up for her rights at school, and that is to recognize that you have responsibilities, that you can't abdicate those responsibilities. That this perspective, and I think it permeates what's happened in the United States, and it's part of how we got here. The perspective that we're not responsible for ourselves if other people like the government or businesses tell us what to do, then it's okay. Then there's a scene out of Kingdom of Heaven that at the end, as the king is dying and he's looking at the new I forgot the title that he had, but he became he took his father's place. Was that a king can move a man and governments can move a man, but in the end, that man is responsible for his own actions, and it's only then that he truly begins playing his own game. It is the acceptance of responsibility. Many of the problems that have happened is because people have abdicated their responsibility. They've allowed government to tell them what to do. They have allowed government to supplement their income. They have allowed government, and and people do need help at different times. There's lots of ways for people to get help. But the more, and I mean, we spent a lot of money in the United States sending out checks that, I mean, it was just made up money. Let's be honest. It was just, they just ran printing presses and in many cases didn't even do that. They just artificially made money and gave it to people, and people became happy, and somebody else provided money for them and they didn't have to do it. It's that abdication of responsibility that allows many people to go along with whatever the story is that's given to them. And that doesn't get you out of a problem. That is typically what gets you into a problem. And so the message for my children, the message for Lauren, this lady's daughter, is to recognize that sometimes just because it's hard, frequently that means you're doing the right thing. Winston Churchill had a saying. He said, "You have enemies, good. It means you stood for something at some point in time." That if we're going to make a difference for ourselves, for our children, our children's children, our friends, it's a matter of us taking responsibility. And that responsibility can be from a religious point of view, it can be from a political point of view, but fundamentally it comes down to you making decisions to do the right thing for the right reason, and to not spend as much time justifying away your mistakes as constantly asking yourself, am I doing the right thing? Or are these people doing the right thing? The federal government, is it doing the right thing when it's made up of people? So my encouragement to my children, my encouragement to Lauren's children, my encouragement to all of your children, is to constantly think about what is the right thing, and to think about it from their own perspective, and to think long and hard in whatever manner that they have. There's lots of different religious beliefs out there, and we all approach this differently. And I try to tell people that don't need me to be a theologian, because there are theologians out there that should be doing that, and you depend upon me for the science. But from a purely personal perspective, you know, the way that you sleep well at night is doing the right thing for the right reason, even if it means that your friends don't talk to you anymore. If you're a schoolgirl kid, or many neighbors, many people, I've listened to them, their families are divided, they've lost friends, they've felt isolated in their communities. But if what you're doing is for the right reason, in the end, that will pay off, even if it's just for you. But if it's in the message that you leave your children and your grandchildren, you have left them with, I believe, the right message.
Yes, well said, Dr. Flemming. Well said. Thank you. Dr. McDowell, what message would you like to relay to this generation that's watching?
Well, we've had some very wise messages from the two doctors preceding. As I think about my two children, they are not presently in the Caribbean. They're both in the U.S. And in their formative years, my wife and I made a decision that we would live a godly life before them. we would let them see two adults living their lives in relationship with God and prefacing all our problem-solving situations and skills with prayer, tackling the vicissitudes and ups and downs of life with biblical advice and prayerful consideration. They saw us worship at our churches and so on. And so we felt that giving them that relationship with God was very important for when they had to leave the nest and go and sojourn on their own. They're both doing quite well. And we think it's because they do have that relationship with God. They can speak to God for themselves. Even though they do speak to us still on a regular basis, we know that they're old enough to make decisions for themselves, and they make those decisions based on their relationship with God. One of the things we tried to teach them about God was that God knows the future and that God also shows the future. And we have to be very cognizant of that. So when, especially at this time where there's a lot of anxiety about the future among people all over the world, I want us to understand that God knows the future and he shows the future. Nothing surprises God. God knows exactly what is going to happen. That's what Bible prophecy teaches. You know, if I were to be involved in some sort of boxing match, or if I were viewing or I was an NFL coach, what was the name of the guy you called Vince Lombardi? Was he a Green Bay Packers coach?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I would, if I was going to play an opponent, one of the things I would do, I would not only strengthen my own players and teach them all the moves and the protocols and the plans I had for them to win the game, I would also study my opponent really in depth and in detail so that I could tailor my winning strategies to my opponent's weaknesses. And to bring it away from the family and onto a broader scale, I want us to understand that that not only does God have an agenda, but Satan also has an agenda. Satan has an end-time agenda. God has an end-time agenda. And if you know both of these, you are better equipped to deal with the future. Let me just mention that there's a passage in James chapter 5, verses 1 through 8, that starts off with 3 words. And the words are, ye rich men. And I want to say very clearly that those words, ye rich men, are not a reference to rich people generally. They are a reference to an elitist banking cartel at the end time hour of Earth's civilization. The Bible says that these men, these ye rich men, are heaping treasure to themselves for the last days. And in that passage, James chapter 5, verses 1 to 8, 4 different times, the Bible speaks of end time things. The coming of the Lord draweth nigh. It's an end time passage. So ye rich men are speaking of the banking cartel, the very cabal that is seeking to subvert the earth at this time. These wicked people who are trying to enforce their agenda on all of humanity. That's Satan's end time agenda. And if we understand that, we would see Satan behind that agenda. But I want us to understand that God also has an end time agenda. And God is saying to all of us, to Dr. Flemming, to Dr. Zelenko, to you, Dr. Mary Crouley, amen. God is saying, not yet. This cabal is not going to win the battle just yet. They're going to make inroads, but I am confident that Dr. Zelenko and Dr. Flemming and myself and you, Dr. Crouley, we're going to defeat them. We're going to defeat them in the now, at the present time. And I believe we are about to experience what I believe there's going to be a shaking and then there's going to be a shift. And we're going to experience a golden age in which there's revival and in which there is harvest. The Bible says in James 5, 1 to 8, that the husbandman waited for the precious fruit of the earth. The earth has never been so inhabited as it is today. We are the precious fruit of the earth. God is going to reap an end time harvest. After that, I won't go into all the end time jargon, but there's going to be a transition event. And then for 7 years, the global cartel is going to hold sway for a period of time until they are finally defeated. But in the near future, I am saying to us as God's people, not yet, not yet. We are, Dr. Crouley, your efforts are going to be rewarded. Dr. Flemming, you will be successful in your quest to indict these criminals against humanity. Dr. Zelenko, live long and prosper, and God is going to reward you for all that you have done for mankind thus far. because God is saying we are about to experience, I would consider it the golden age of the church, when there's going to be revival and there's going to be harvest, there's going to be breakthrough. Amen. So let's get ready for what God has in store.
Yes.
God bless you.
Well, thank you. That was well said as well, Dr. McDowell. Dr. Flemming, where again is your event that you said that you were going to be having coming up?
So there's 9 cities, and people can go to Crimes Against Humanity Tour. The first event is going to be in Fort Myers, Florida, on the 23rd of April of this month, and then on the 1st of May we will be in Los Angeles, and then we have 7 other cities after that, which will include Chicago and Phoenix, I believe, and I believe someplace in New Jersey. I think it's Jersey City. We'll be in Houston. We'll be in Dallas. We're going to be in Tampa. And I'm sure I left somebody off the list there. But 9 cities, and Crimes Against Humanity tours where people can find out more about it and sign up to go for it, and the locations for their cities.
Could you tell us the kickoff date again? The initial date in Fort Myers?
So the 23rd of April in Fort Myers, Florida.
Okay, well, I'll come and see you in Los Angeles.
Perfect. The
I
1st of
love
May.
that. Yes, 1st of May. I hope I'll be in town. But anyway, thank you all for coming on, Dr. Zelenko, Dr. Flemming, Dr. McDowell. Thank you for watching. Now is the time. We are in a situation in the world that it's been a crisis. But, I always say that God is going to show up and show off. It's a Red Sea moment, and it's the greatest show on earth. And, though it looks dark, we're going to see that we're going to hit it out of the park, because the bases are going to be loaded, and we're going to hit a grand slam, and all of heaven's going to do the wave. And that's what God tells me is going to happen. But in the meantime, the word of God says, if God be for us, who can be against us? Remember that, with this regeneration event, as I close this out, up on that stage at the Reawaken America tour, and it was on Field of Dreams Parkway at this volcano stadium that Clay Clark had to put up this tent with 4,000 or 5,000 people under it. And God told me to bring the youth up on stage, and I shared a while, but it wasn't about me. He had me pass the mic to this 14-year-old kid who was suicidal because he had to be masked up and was isolated and everything. And it wasn't until a mother, another woman named Amanda, who's 28 years old, who was a youth pastor, she reached out to him and helped him. It's the fathers and the mothers, it's the mamas and the papas that God's going to bring in now to say, listen, our ceiling is going to be your floor. You're going to go higher than we are. And when I handed that mic to Alfredo and he shared for 2 minutes, it's like people cheered for him. We need to cheer for them because it's their time. We need to raise them up. Now is the time. So remember, no matter you're only going to have, our kids are only going to be with us. They're little only so long. And so it's this time. And that's what they're trying to do, is come after our kids and trying to get them jabbed. In California, they're trying to make it mandated. This is part of the vaccine agenda for the children. And so we all have to stand up for now is the time. So listen, my website is on the bottom of the screen, marycrowley.com. I always say my name's right in the middle of America. God told me that like years ago. He said, Mary, your name's right in the middle of America. I go like, wow, it is. Mary means shining sea. And it's not about me. It's about all of us coming together in unity from sea to shining sea. We're going to bring forth destiny because it's his time. And together we can make it happen. So pray for all of us and pray that these guys will be indicted, just as Dr. Flemming is talking about. And it's going to be, I believe, the greatest time to be alive in history. So don't allow fear to come in, to creep in, because fear, God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and of a sound mind. Okay, guys? So thanks for watching. We love you and hope you can come join us. We do these broadcasts every week. So we'll have these great doctors on very soon. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
So listen, guys. Okay. So let me get this out of there. Okay. So listen, Dr. Flemming, that was awesome. And Dr. McDowell, I've got to go down to this dinner. In fact, they ordered a steak for me like at 8 o'clock. I thought